You're not just a viewer, you're part of this journey. Subscribe today, and let's make 1,000 subscribers our shared victory. I stood by my father's grave in my full dress uniform, and my own sister looked at me like I had spit on his coffin. "Couldn't afford a black dress?" she whispered, just loud enough for the relatives around us to hear. A few of them actually smiled. One cousin covered her mouth to hide a laugh. Nobody defended me. Not one person in that crowd knew what those bars on my shoulder meant. They just saw a woman in a strange outfit, standing alone, while everyone else wore black. But by the end of that day, the same people laughing at me would be staring at the ground, too afraid to meet my eyes. And the man who called himself the head of our family would be shaking so hard he could barely speak. This is the story of the day I buried my father, and the day my family finally learned who I had become. My name is Sarah, and I grew up as the other daughter. My older sister, Michelle, was always the star. She was the one my mother bragged about at every dinner party. She got the piano lessons, the college fund, the wedding paid for in full. I got told to be practical. When I said I wanted to serve my country, my own father laughed and said the military was not for girls like me. He wanted me to marry well, like Michelle had. He wanted a daughter who would make him look good at church, not one who would leave home and disappear into some far-off base. So I left anyway. I joined because I needed something that was mine. Not my sister's leftovers. Not my mother's approval. Just mine. The years that followed were the hardest of my life. Long deployments. Missed holidays. Nights where I questioned every decision I had ever made. But slowly, quietly, I built something. I earned respect from people who didn't care whose daughter I was. I earned rank. I earned a title that most of my family never even knew existed because I never talked about it at home. Why hide it? Because every time I tried to share something proud, Michelle would find a way to shrink it. A promotion became, "That's nice, but did you hear about my new house?" A commendation became, "That's cute, sweetie." So I stopped sharing. I let them believe I was still just wandering around in some uniform, doing something vague and unimportant. That silence would cost me more than I ever expected. The call came on a Tuesday morning. My mother's voice was shaking. "Your father is gone," she said. "His heart. It was fast. He didn't suffer." I sat there in my quarters for a long time after that call, staring at the wall. My father and I never fixed things between us. We never had the conversation where he told me he was proud. Now we never would. I requested emergency leave immediately. My commanding officer granted it without hesitation and told me something I would carry with me the whole flight home. "Wear your uniform to the funeral," he said. "Your father earned the right to be honored by what you became, even if he never said it out loud." I didn't fully understand what he meant at the time. I just knew I wanted to represent something real at that funeral instead of pretending to be someone I wasn't anymore. I had no idea that decision would turn into a battlefield of its own. The funeral home was packed. Relatives I hadn't seen in years. Neighbors. Old co-workers of my father's. And right in the center of it all, Michelle, dressed in an elegant black dress, playing the role of grieving daughter perfectly, guiding people to their seats, accepting hugs and condolences like she was hosting a gala. Then I walked in. Every conversation seemed to pause for half a second. People stared at my uniform, confused. A few whispered. I ignored it and walked straight to the casket, straightened my back, and gave my father the formal salute I never got to give him in life. That was when Michelle approached me, her voice sharp enough to cut through the quiet room. "Couldn't afford a black dress?" she said, tilting her head with a smile that was anything but kind. "Really, Sarah? You couldn't even make an effort for Dad's funeral?" A ripple of laughter moved through a small cluster of relatives standing near her. My mother, standing just a few feet away, said nothing. She simply looked down at her hands. I felt my face burn with humiliation, but I said nothing back. I would not turn my father's funeral into a fight. I stepped away from the group and stood alone near the back wall, watching the service unfold, feeling like a stranger at my own family gathering. At the cemetery, the mockery continued in smaller ways. A cousin snapped a photo of me and whispered something to her husband. An uncle asked, loud enough for others to hear, if I was still playing dress-up in the army. I stood at the edge of the crowd, alone, while my sister stood front and center with her husband, David, beside her. David worked in some kind of corporate security consulting job, and he loved reminding everyone about it. He wore an expensive suit and a smug expression, the kind of man who measured people's worth by their paycheck. As the priest spoke the final words over my father's casket, I kept my composure. I thought about my commanding officer's words. I thought about every night I spent away from home, doing work that mattered, work my family would never understand because I never let them see it. I told myself, today is about Dad, not about them. But fate, it seemed, had other plans. As the service ended and people began walking back toward their cars, a black government vehicle pulled up near the cemetery gates. 2 officers stepped out in full formal uniform and approached the gathering with purpose. Everyone froze. They walked directly past Michelle, past my mother, past the entire cluster of relatives, and stopped in front of me. One of them saluted crisply. "Commander," he said. "We're sorry for your loss, ma'am. Command sent us to make sure the arrangements were being handled properly and to extend formal condolences on behalf of the unit." The word commander seemed to hang in the air like a thunderclap. David's face went pale. He stepped closer, squinting at the insignia on my shoulder, the one he had dismissed as just a costume, only an hour earlier. His mouth opened, but nothing came out at first. "Wait," he finally stammered. You're the 132nd commander?" I turned to him calmly. "Yes. I have been for the past 2 years." The silence that followed was almost physical. Every relative who had laughed at me earlier suddenly found something very interesting to look at on the ground. My mother's hand flew to her mouth. Michelle's smug expression cracked completely, replaced by something closer to panic. David's reaction was the one that told me everything I needed to know about how deep the disrespect really ran. His company, it turned out, held several contracts that depended on approval and oversight from military logistics divisions that fell directly under my command's authority. He had spent the last 2 years boasting at family dinners about his connections and his influence, never realizing that the woman he mocked as unable to afford a black dress was the very person whose signature could approve or deny contracts worth millions. "And Mom," he stammered, "I didn't know the 132nd commander was you." I didn't answer him right away. I let him sit in that silence, the same silence I had been forced to sit in for years every time my achievements were dismissed at that same family table. Finally, I spoke. "You didn't need to know who I was to treat me with basic respect. That should have been enough on its own." He had no response for that. Neither did anyone else standing around us. In the days that followed, word of what happened at the cemetery spread quietly through the family. Michelle called me twice. I didn't answer either time. My mother sent a long message trying to explain that she didn't realize how serious my career had become, as if that excused years of dismissing me. I did not seek revenge in the way people might expect. I didn't need to ruin David's business or humiliate Michelle publicly. The truth itself had already done more damage to their pride than anything I could have said. But I did make one decision. When David's company later submitted a routine renewal request that crossed my desk for review, I handled it exactly the way I would have handled any other request, fairly, professionally, based only on merit. Not favoring him, not punishing him, simply treating him like anyone else, without the special respect he assumed his family connection would buy him. That, more than anything, seemed to shake him. He realized that being related to me meant nothing extra. He would have to earn everything on his own, the same way I always had. A few weeks after the funeral, I visited my father's grave alone, back in my uniform. This time there was no crowd, no whispers, no mockery. Just quiet. I told him everything I never got the chance to say. That I forgave him for doubting me all those years ago. That I hoped, somewhere, he was proud of the woman I had become, even if he never said those words to my face. Standing there, I finally understood what my commanding officer meant when he told me to wear my uniform that day. It wasn't about proving anything to my family. It was about honoring the truth of who I was, without apology, regardless of who was watching or what they thought. Looking back now, I don't feel proud of the panic on David's face or the silence that fell over my relatives that day. What I feel is something quieter than pride. Relief, maybe. Or peace. For years, I let my family's opinion of me shrink who I was. I hid my achievements to avoid their jealousy. I stayed quiet to keep the peace. But peace built on hiding your own worth isn't peace at all, it's surrender. The truth is, people will often judge you by what they can see on the surface. A uniform instead of a black dress. A quiet relative instead of a loud one. They will assume, they will mock, and sometimes they will laugh, simply because they don't understand what they're looking at. But the truth always has a way of standing up for itself, eventually. You don't need to announce your worth to every room you walk into. Live it. Earn it. And when the moment comes for the truth to reveal itself, let it speak louder than any insult ever could. My father may not have said he was proud of me while he was alive, but I believe somewhere he finally saw it that day at the cemetery. And that was worth more than anything my sister could ever say.